Lego making this thing, namely this kit. Now what happens to these users? Well, they decide to, in effect, build a toolkit that seems socially right to them. So what this is they used to get together in these meetings and they used to share their designs. In this particular instance, what they began to do was they said, well, if we share standards so that everybody's building will interconnect, then when we get together, we will have, in effect, an instant sort of mega project. So this was a user idea, and what they did, you see here these users, and this is called Moonbase. And what these users did was they basically posted the interface designs and the standards for this thing. That then became this kind of major sort of social activity, different kinds of designs that they were sharing and so on. Now notice, this is totally outside of the process customarily addressed by mass customization processes, right? This is the social activity, the collaborative social activity, which results in designs. And these users at this time are building their own tools for collaboration. They're saying, gosh, we really ought to have interface designs and things like this. Now, toolkits, well, let me go to this. In other areas, when we study and when we try to understand how user innovation will work in the future, it won't really be anymore, typically, one customer ordering one thing by interacting with a toolkit, I suggest. It will be multiple people designing stuff in an interactive, rapid fashion. And the place where you can see this most clearly today is in open source software. Now, in open source software, what we have is a study that I'm doing with Karim Lakhani, where we're actually looking at sort of the behaviors of all these people involved in there. And what you see is this fascinating situation where this was a particular feature that was developed for a database program called Postgres. And the particular feature was to automatically clean the data tables. It's called auto-vacuuming, intelligent auto-vacuuming, so that the crud from previous calculations didn't sort of accumulate. So what you see in this little feature, there were a couple hundred of these features introduced in a new periodic introduction, like this was, I think, 9.4, 7.4 revision of this software. There were a couple hundred, quote, features. This was one. What you saw there is 23 people coming out of the void and contributing. And it was triggered off basically by one guy saying, you know what, I've got a problem with auto-vacuuming. I've got a problem. And then what happened was other people began to come out of the woodwork. And they began to engage in sort of a collaborative solution building. All these were messages and design ideas transmitted the same day as the original suggestion. And then they began to collaboratively build, and what you ended up seeing less than 2 months later was an encoded solution that was distributed across the board that had been proven. Now, these people who developed this in a collaborative fashion have developed in open source software ways of proceeding, ways of interacting with each other, like CVS, ways to bring revisions in and out quickly, having a trial version and then a standard version, and so on and so forth. These people have developed methodologies that work very well in open source software, which is an information product. But when you think to yourself that most products are digital in the design phase nowadays, then what you can say to yourself is, you know what? The principles that are operating here could in fact be carried over to ourselves as well. So, basically then, just to sum up, what I'm saying is, yes, we know users innovate. We've shown that users are at the beginning of most curves. You know, the first hard lung machine, the first this, the first that. But what we are increasingly beginning to appreciate is that the economic winner is going to be collaborative user innovation. And collaborative user innovation takes specialized tools. So basically, when we think about mass customization as a process, the whole idea of making what eventually people collaboratively design is one side of an interface. But equally important with respect to tool design and understanding the principles is the stuff ahead of that. And as I say, historically, most mass customization processes have been sort of one customer dealing with a toolkit. But in fact, what we really have to have, for reasons of economic efficiency, are these kind of collaborative toolkits. And if we don't have them, or if you don't have them, if you don't design them in your own cases and offer them to users, what happens is that the users, because of the increased efficiency involved, go off and design them for themselves. You have a comparative advantage as a manufacturer, I guess some of you are, if you design a toolkit that in fact others do adopt and can use as their language. Let's see if I can find one here. It's very cool. Frank, you see how organized I am? Yeah. So here's an interesting example. Well, here's an earlier example. This is gate arrays. This is semiconductors. This was, again, designing for an individual user. But the interesting thing was LSI Logic came in and they said, well, okay, we'll give you a toolkit to design. And in the early days, they got a huge monopoly because, basically, the LSI language that they gave the users turned out to be a language that the users wanted to retain. It's like you learning the QWERTY keyboard. You come in early to an area and help a user innovation group innovate. You will, at the same time as you give them tools, you will give them tools that interface well to your production side of the process. And so you have a comparative advantage that will last for years and years and years. Okay? So, that's, Frank is now saying that's it. So thank you very much. Sorry? So we have time for questions, yes. Please.
Are there other non-hobby examples? Some of them are
Yes. I mean, the same phenomenon is happening, for example, amongst spine surgeons. You know, 700 spine surgeons got together on Spine Connect and begin to exchange information. Absolutely. The principles are absolutely the same. The reason we stick with, or have been doing sports hobbies is because often my students are in that age group.
And then you see